We're honored to have Professor Dr. Kenneth Atkinson from the Department of Philosophy and Religion at UNI to share with us what the true meaning of jihad is. A little information about Dr. Atkinson: he teaches several courses on this campus. He teaches Religions of the World, Humanities 1, a Biblical Studies class, and he's currently teaching a course on Islam and Judaism. Next semester, he'll be teaching a seminar actually, that is related to the topic he'll be discussing tonight, which is jihad. So hopefully we'll all learn a little bit more about jihad in Islam.
Hello, thank you very much. Thank you all for coming. Many people since the events of 9/11 have become interested in Islam. Although it is good that people want to know more about Islam, there are also some problems with this sudden interest. In our age of instant communication and 24-hour media, the people oftentimes speaking about Islam have little or no understanding of Islam's rich history, scripture, and the diversity within the Islamic faith itself. Unfortunately, many people continue to be misled into thinking that Islam is a violent religion. Unfortunately, the media frequently permits terrorists to speak for all Muslims. This has as much validity as permitting the Crusaders, the Inquisition, or the Christian terrorist of Northern Ireland to speak for all Christians. What is all too often obscured in the contemporary debate is that the religion of Islam is actually very close to the religions of Judaism and Christianity. What I would like to do today is to speak on what is perhaps the most misunderstood topic in Islam, jihad. I would imagine if a poll could be taken today about the meaning of jihad, most Americans would immediately say that it means holy war. For those of you who are Muslims, you know that this is incorrect. In this presentation, I would like to give a historical introduction to the topic of jihad. My background is as an historian and an archaeologist who specializes in the history of religion. And I am not a Muslim, but I have studied Islamic history and literature in depth. And because I am not a Muslim, I hope this will lend some credibility to what I have to say, since I have no reason to lie about Islam in order to support my own beliefs. I am simply going to look at Islam historically and focus on the Qur'an and Muhammad, the earliest period of Islam. I am restricting my comments to this early period since it is the basis for all contemporary Islamic beliefs and practices. Also, when non-Muslims want to know about Islam, they look to the early days of the faith when Muhammad received the revelations preserved in the Qur'an. Moreover, many non-Muslims have misconceptions about this period, which they use to understand contemporary Islam. For those who are Muslims, I hope that you will find my perspective on Islam as an outsider helpful and useful in helping you to teach others about your faith. For those who are non-Muslims in the audience, I hope that you will not focus on contemporary violations of many of the early Islamic beliefs and practices that I am about to describe. Some Muslims, like some Jews and some Christians, do not follow all the teachings of their own religion. What I am focusing on today are some of the basic teachings and beliefs of Islam which all true Muslims are required to follow. Jihad is among these requirements. Before beginning, I want to clarify a few words for the non-Muslims in our audience. It is customary for Muslims to use the phrase, peace be upon him, after the mention of one of the prophets recognized by Islam. Although I will not use this phrase because I am not a Muslim, I mean no disrespect to the religion of Islam. Also, when I use the word Qur'an, I am technically not quoting from the Qur'an. In Islam, the sacred scriptures, the Qur'an, is only the Qur'an when it is read in Arabic. A translation is technically an interpretation of the Qur'an. So when I use the word Qur'an today, I am actually referring to an English translation or interpretation. And for those unfamiliar with the Qur'an is divided into chapters called surahs, which are further divided into verses. And in keeping with Muslim tradition, I will use the Arabic name for God, which is Allah. For those not familiar with Islam, Allah is the same God worshipped by Jews and Christians today. Along with Judaism and Christianity, Islam is a monotheistic religion. All three worship the same God. In order to understand what jihad is, it is necessary first to briefly describe the conditions of the Arabian Peninsula before the arrival of the Prophet Muhammad. Muhammad was born in the city of Mecca, which is located in present-day Saudi Arabia, in 570 AD. Most people at this time were pagan, polytheist, worshiped many gods. There were few Jewish tribes in cities such as Yathrib, Khaybar, and Fadak. These Jews were indistinguishable from most other people in the region. In fact, most were Arabs, as well as most pagans were Arabs. There was also small Christian presence in the region, but the dominant religion was polytheism, or paganism. Life at this time was very difficult. Starvation was always a threat. The nomads had formed themselves into autonomous groups over time on the basis of blood and kinship. They were united by real or mythical common ancestors and called themselves, for example, the Bani Kalab or Bani Asad, the sons of Kalab and sons of Asad. These groups were called clans. These groups allied themselves with others in larger, more tenuous associations called tribes. Only the tribe could ensure the survival of its members. There was no room for individualism. Everything and everyone had to be subordinated to the interest of the group. There was no law except tribal law. Each tribe had its own laws and rules. Outside the tribe, all obligations ceased. A person was only accountable to other members of his or her own tribe. Each tribe looked after its own members, took care of its weaker members, and distributed its goods equally. This protection assistance was generally not given to those outside the tribe unless they were allied to the tribe through treaty. The leader of the tribe had the duty to dispense gifts to the members of the tribe and any friendly allies. At this time, people believed disaster was inevitable. Nothing could be done to prolong life. Each tribe had to seek justice in this life. Any injury suffered by members of a tribe had to be paid back by members of the tribe. It was only wrong to kill members of your own tribe or your allies. If someone was killed, there was no duty to actually punish the murderer. Just simply punishing someone approximately the same age or worth in another tribe was enough to redress the balance. The individual did not matter, only the tribe, in keeping the balance of power equal. At this time, only the strong were permitted to survive. Infanticide, the exposure of infants, was common. Although most tribes were polytheistic, the tribe basically constituted the sacred. There was no general belief in an afterlife. No individual had a unique or eternal destiny. Tribal memory was the only form of immortality. There was no caste of priest, just recounting the stories of the gods of the tribes. Chiefs in the tribes were chosen for their power and leadership. This position was not passed down to the son automatically. Women had very few rights. They could inherit property since descent was reckoned through the female line, but generally they had no human and very few legal rights. Men could take as many slaves as they wanted and as many women. Raiding played a central role in pre-Islamic society. The raid was a way of preserving the balance of power, but raiding was also more than that. It was a national sport. In times of hardship, tribes would raid one another. Also, to show their valor, manlyhood, tribes would raid one another. Warfare was not undertaken for religious reasons. It was merely undertaken either to obtain plunder or military glory. It was usually bloody. There are no early writings or inscriptions from the pre-Islamic period in Arabia that describe what we would call holy war. All conflicts were simply political conflicts or conflicts for glory or plunder. They were not motivated by religion or ideology. They were simply undertaken to prove courage and to take the property of another tribe to show that your tribe was more powerful. It was into this world that Muhammad was born. In the year 610, Muhammad received the first revelation at 40 years of age. Islam has traditionally looked upon the period before Muhammad as a time of ignorance. The Muslim refugee to Abyssinia, Jafar ibn Abi Talib, is said to have told the Christian ruler, the Negus, quote, "O king, we were an uncivilized people worshiping idols, committing abominations, breaking natural ties, treating guests badly. and our strong devoured our weak. Thus we were until God sent us an apostle. He commanded us to speak the truth, to be faithful to our engagements, to refrain from crimes of bloodshed. He forbade us to commit abominations and to speak lies, and to devour the property of orphans or to vilify chaste women." End of quote. Historically, Muhammad's ministry marks one of the greatest transformations of a society in history. The coming of Islam marks a major change in the social, religious, and economic fabric of society in Arabia. This change was not simply religious, but a complete retransformation of society and the creation of a very new society. Muhammad completely changed the tribal system that had dominated life in Arabia since the prehistoric era. Muhammad's early followers faced much persecution for their belief in one God. They were threatened with their very survival. Something had to be done, otherwise the early Islamic community would cease to exist. From July to September 622 AD, Muhammad moved his followers from Mecca to the city of Medina. This migration, known as the Hijra, marked a turning point in the history of the Islamic community. Muhammad had long warned people to repent and to obey the one God because the final judgment was near. Each person he taught was accountable for his or her own actions. The one God, Allah, demanded righteousness of everyone. Even more profound, Muhammad taught something new and unheard of. He said that all followers of the one true God belong to a single universal community, the Ummah, that transcended all tribal bounds. Muhammad emphasized the unity of the human race. He taught that all believers belong to this universal community of God. In Surah 2, verse 143, the Qur'an says, "Thus we made you an ummah justly balanced, that you might be witness over the nations." Muhammad taught that the Muslim community has a mission to create a moral social order. Surah 3, verse 110, "You are the best community evolved for mankind in joining what is right and forbidding what is wrong." The socioeconomic reforms mandated upon the universal community of believers is among the most striking aspects of the Islamic faith. Muhammad denounced the exploitation of the poor, the weak, widows, women, orphans, slaves. He demanded justice of all believers. All members of the community were to take care of one another, irregardless of their race or previous clan ties. Muhammad demanded social justice and the pursuit of righteousness. The religion of Islam marks its calendar with the Hijra, the creation of the first Islamic community of Muhammad's followers to Medina. This is a very profound statement for Muslims. It is not Muhammad's birthday, nor the date of his revelation, but the creation of the Islamic community that marks the beginning of the Islamic calendar. The consequences of this event cannot be overstated. By following Muhammad to Medina, the first Muslims effectively renounced the entire social structure and institutions based in the clan that had existed since prehistory. They were now united only by their common belief in one God and their commitment to create a perfect society on earth based on social justice. This, I believe, was the greatest and perhaps the first true jihad in the history of Islam. Jihad has always been a central teaching of Islam. It goes back to the early days of the movement before the migration from Mecca to Medina. When the Muslims moved to Medina to create the first Islamic community, jihad was also one of their central beliefs. Although jihad is a central tenet of Islam, it is widely misunderstood. In the press, it is often assumed to be synonymous with war and violence. Many books state that jihad is the fighting against unbelievers with the object of winning them over to Islam by force, subduing them, or exterminating them when they refuse to convert to Islam. It is often erroneously believed that this is binding upon all Muslims today. The problem with this interpretation is that it's wrong. It simply reflects European misconceptions and stereotypes about Islam. The semantic meaning of the Arabic term jihad has absolutely no relation to holy war or even to war. It derives from the root meaning to strive or to exert oneself. It's simply to struggle. Jihad is a verbal noun of the third Arabic form of the root jahada, which means exerting one's utmost power, efforts, endeavors, or ability in contending with an object of disapproval. In Islamic literature, the objects of disapproval are frequently categorized as deriving from three sources: a visible enemy, the devil, and aspects of one's own self. There are many different kinds of jihad, and almost all have absolutely nothing to do with warfare. The jihad of the heart, for example, refers to the struggle against one's own sinful inclinations, while the jihad of the tongue requires that a Muslim speak on behalf of the good and avoid evil. According to a hadith of Muslim bin al-Hajjaj, which is an early collection of stories about Muhammad, the Prophet Muhammad once spoke about several types of jihad. Muhammad said, "Every prophet sent by God to a nation before me has had disciples and followers who followed his ways and obeyed his commands. But after them came successors who preached what they did not practice and practiced what they were not commanded. Whoever strives against them with one's hand is a believer. Whoever strives against them with one's tongue is a believer. Whoever strives against them with one's heart is a believer. There is nothing greater than the size of a mustard seed beyond that in the way of faith." Muhammad also said in another hadith, "The best jihad is speaking a word of justice to a tyrannical ruler." Jihad does not mean warfare. It possesses a variety of meanings, all of which focus on inner struggle. For the early Islamic community and for contemporary Muslims, jihad is a duty that they're required to do every day. It is simply the struggle to be a righteous person. Muhammad began to preach about jihad in the early days of the movement in the city of Mecca. In Surah 29, verse 69, Muhammad said that jihad is simply exerting one's power and the ability to follow God. He said nothing about war. In the same surah of the Qur'an, in verse 6, Muhammad uses the word jihad twice and says, quote, "Whoever strives hard strives for himself, that is for his own benefit, for Allah is self-sufficient above the needs of the world," end of quote. Further on in the same surah, in verse 8, Muhammad spoke of jihad as being good to parents and others. In this instance, jihad is simply showing respect for parents. Muhammad did face opposition in Mecca, yet he never called for violence. In Surahs 22 and 25, Muhammad called for two types of jihad. The first was a jihad against unbelievers to bring them near to God. This jihad was through living a righteous Muslim lifestyle. The second was the jihad of the Qur'an, which was teaching others the revelations of the Qur'an. Muhammad stressed that the true jihad was a struggle to live a righteous lifestyle in order to show believers Allah's grace. Muhammad continued to preach jihad after his community followed him to the city of Mecca. Having renounced all clan ties, his early followers practiced jihad by becoming members of the universal community of believers. They now struggled together, practiced jihad, to live the best they could, live a lifestyle of righteousness based upon their common belief in one God, a God who demanded social justice. In Medina, the early community was threatened with its survival. It was at this time that Muhammad received a series of revelations that are frequently misunderstood that authorized Muslims to fight. Muhammad is a unique figure in religious history because he achieved success during his lifetime as a religious leader, a political leader, and a military leader. He united the entire Arabian Peninsula under Islam. Although there was some fighting in the early history of Islam, it is wrong to say that Islam was a violent religion from its beginning. The Quran speaks about armed struggle largely in order to avoid it. Because there are so many people interested in understanding armed struggle, I would like to take a few moments to look at warfare in Islam, hopefully in order to clarify some common misconceptions. The Quran, the early biographies about Muhammad, and the early historical accounts agree that many of the early Muslims did not want to fight. Some did not want to fight members of their own clans. Others were not committed to the movement, found it too difficult to be a Muslim. There are certain circumstances under which jihad can mean armed struggle. Islam developed a theory of warfare that is in many respects similar to the Christian doctrine of a just war. Both Christianity and Judaism throughout its history have used religion to justify warfare. Both continue to do so to the present day. This must be kept in mind when discussing Islam, since it is a point that is all too often overlooked. Like Judaism and Christianity, Islam is regarded as a peaceful religion that wants to avoid war. The religion of Islam, however, created a new type of warfare that was unheard of in the ancient Middle East prior to the time of Muhammad. The Qur'an recognizes that there will be wars, yet the Qur'an seeks to place limitations upon violence as a means to end violence and to seek a lasting peace. It limits wars, and when war breaks out, it seeks to end violence as quickly as possible and to bring about conditions that ensure a lasting peace. Islam has always regarded the true jihad as a struggle to be a righteous person. Surah 22, verse 78 encourages believers to strive hard with Allah for due striving. According to one tradition, Muhammad once said that the Hajj, the pilgrimage to Mecca, to worship the one God with other believers, is the greatest of all jihads. Jihad is simply the obligation incumbent on all Muslims to exert themselves to realize God's will, to lead virtuous lives, and to extend the Islamic community through preaching and education. Warfare only comes in play for purposes of self-defense and only under certain following conditions, which are primarily spelled out in Surah 2, the cow, as well as many other places in the Quran. First, Surah 2, verse 190. Fight for the sake of God against those who fight against you, but do not attack them first. God does not love aggressors. Verse 37, permission to take up arms is given to those who are attacked because they have been wronged. Do not destroy churches and synagogues. Islam is unique among the religions of the world because it requires soldiers in a just war to respect the religious shrines of other religions, in this case, Judaism and Christianity. Surah 2, verse 178 only permits fighting after an attack. Warfare has to be defensive. Surah 49, the Quran says that Muslims are to make peace between believers and that the righteous have a duty to protect the innocent from aggression. If a war is just, non-combatants cannot be attacked. If the enemy wants to make peace, you have to stop fighting and negotiate immediately. In 657 AD, there was a civil war within Islam between Ali and Muawiyah over the political leadership of Islam. When Ali's forces were about to win the battle, Muawiyah's men called for peace and arbitration according to the conditions of the Quran. The battle immediately ceased. This example shows how early Muslims viewed war. Peace was more important than fighting. Armed struggle in Islam is widely misunderstood. What may be surprising to many is that it was also misunderstood during Muhammad's own time. The Quran contains many passages, such as Surah 4, verse 95, in which Muhammad denounces many of his followers for refusing to fight a defensive warfare to protect the Ummah. The problem was that some Muslims were not willing to accept the concept of the Ummah, the universal community of all believers. This was very difficult. Helping a member of your own tribe, that was something everyone understood. But helping people who were not related through tribe, kinship ties, or treaties, the Ummah was something they could not quite comprehend. Many early Muslims did not see the need to help others. Muhammad taught that the real jihad was to struggle against evil and unbelief, become a member of a universal community of believers to bring righteousness upon the earth. Muhammad stressed that everyone was equal, irregardless of their clan or race. Muhammad also stressed that under no circumstances were Muslims to practice forced conversion. A person who is forced to join the Ummah cannot be a true Muslim. Islam is something that people must willingly accept. The Quran also states that there is no compulsion in religion, Surah 2, verse 256. The importance of this passage cannot be overstated, since this verse, along with many others in the Quran, recognizes Judaism and Christianity as valid and protected faiths. Surah 8, verse 61, Muhammad said, "If they seek peace, make peace with them, put your trust in God." The Quran, Surah 4, verse 28, also bans suicide. It says, "Do not kill yourselves, God is merciful to you, but he that does that through wickedness and injustice shall be burnt in fire." It is also incorrect to say that early Islam was anti-Semitic. It is true that some of Muhammad's opponents were Jews, but it is also true that many of his friends and allies were Jews. The Jews in Saudi Arabia, as well as the pagans, were mainly Arabs. Some Jews, some pagan tribes made treaties with Muhammad. Some Jews fought in the early battles alongside Muhammad, including the Battle of Badr in 624. When wars were fought between opponents of Muhammad, it was only under circumstances when the Islamic community perceived that it was acting in self-defense. Although some historians may disagree upon the reasons for some of the early battles, it's important to recognize that the early Islamic community considered these wars just because they saw that their survival was in danger. When wars were fought, they were fought for violations of treaties, related reasons, related only to self-defense. The early Islamic community did not attack people for their religious beliefs. After the Battle of Badr, Muhammad received a revelation about the treatment of prisoners. Surah 8. Prisoners were to be treated with respect, not harmed. The Qur'an banned the practice of taking women prisoners as concubines. They were to become legal wives if taken as wives. These practices were unheard of in Muhammad's time. During the siege of Khaybar, Muhammad besieged a Jewish tribe in the city for a month. When they asked for peace, Muhammad accepted, the battle ceased. Shortly after, Muhammad even married a Jewish girl from the city, Safia, who shortly thereafter converted on her own to Islam after seeing Muhammad's example. When Muhammad fought his very last battle, he recited a verse which condemned racism. Muhammad also did something unique. He granted amnesty, spared the lives of all the people of Mecca, many of whom had opposed his religion from its beginning and had persecuted the first Ummah. Muhammad did not call for continued warfare. And I hope that this historical review of jihad has helped everyone, especially non-Muslims in the audience today, to understand exactly what jihad means. Jihad is not warfare or armed struggle against believers. Although Muslims were permitted to fight on a few occasions, it's only for self-defense. Warfare was only to be continued as long as religious persecution lasted. When the danger ceased, war was to cease. When there was no danger of persecution, there is to be no war. When the early Muslim community was asked to describe their religion, they contrasted its peaceful message with their previous violent lifestyle before the arrival of Islam. They stressed that they were somehow different because they were now required to refrain from shedding innocent blood according to the old laws of the clan system. The early Muslims recognized that their new religion was a radical departure from the violence of their past. They saw their world as more peaceful and just than it had been earlier. The early Muslims believed that they had joined a peaceful and just religion. There is no reason to challenge their beliefs, since most early converts to Islam never fought any battles, nor did they seek to fight any. Islam, like its relatives, Judaism, Christianity, stresses spiritual jihad. The Qur'an teaches that the true jihad is the jihad that's fought each waking moment. It is simply the struggle to avoid evil and be a righteous person. When Muhammad laid out the agreement defining membership in the Ummah of Medina and the Ummah's relationship to non-Muslim communities, he used the concept of jihad to describe these relationships. He said that all Muslims are bound to one another in a universal struggle against evil. Muhammad recognized Judaism and Christianity as valid religions. In this respect, Islam is unique among the monotheistic faiths because it recognizes other forms of monotheism as valid. It also offered protection to Jews and Christians, which the Qur'an frequently calls people of the book. Muhammad stressed peace, not war. The true jihad for Muslims who follow the traditions and teachings of the Prophet Muhammad is to live righteous lives as members of the universal Ummah. The Qur'an teaches that Muslims are expected to strive so that they may live righteous lifestyle so that all people will want to become Muslims. The Qur'an does not explain why, despite successive prophetic revelations, religious disunity exists today. The Qur'an considers this a mystery known only to God. Moreover, the Qur'an in Surah 5 says, "If God had so willed, God would have made all of you a single community. But God has not done so, that God may test you in what God has given you. So compete in goodness, for you shall all return to God, and God will tell you the truth about that which you have disagreed over." The Qur'an challenges us all to religious competition in goodness. The Qur'an even extends to Jews and Christians the following invitation, Surah 3, verse 64. "O people of the book, let us come together upon a formula which is common between us, so that we shall not serve anyone but God, and we shall take no other God besides God. The Quran's call for all religions to live a righteous lifestyle is an invitation which people of all faith traditions should be willing to accept. Jihad, the striving and struggle to be a righteous person, is not only a duty for all Muslims, it's actually the duty for all of us here today. Thank you for coming. Okay, is there any questions or comments? I think we have some time. Oh, yes.
So what would be the best way to educate our youngsters here in the U.S. to learn about this real truth rather than just what they have heard from the media? What would be the best way to educate them? What would you suggest to them?
I think schools like you and I think, are very important because we have class like Religions of the World, Humanities, where students learn this. And I think that's ideally the best way is education. I found that my students, once they begin looking at the Quran, they're just shocked to see that most of what they believed about Islam is incorrect. And I think education is really the key. Most Christians and Jews have never heard much about Islam. There are just so many misconceptions. And writing to the media, speaking, events like this, and I know Fahmy has done a wonderful job speaking around the community. I think that's the best thing we can each of us do. And we see people around us, tell them about the religion of Islam. For people who are Muslims, tell Jews, Christians what you have in common with their faith. Most of my students I found are shocked to know that Moses, Jesus, Mary, Abraham are in the Quran. And I think once people know that, then most of these misconceptions will break down. That actually we are different religions, but we have more in common than things that separate us. And in fact, we all three monotheistic faiths worship the one God, believe in Abraham. And Islam is unique because it does accept the other two religions. And that's something that we really need to bring out more, especially in the press. Yeah. Oh, yes.
Thank you for your comments. That was very nicely done. I'm just wondering if there is any effort amongst the academicians to incorporate something in the education of like younger children in middle and elementary schools or high schools, as to giving them proper factual education rather than letting them just learn it through media and biased way of learning. That if there's any effort to incorporate some true facts.
Unfortunately, there's very little because most school systems are afraid to bring religion in the classroom. So that's really where something needs to be done.
But yet there is some introduction to the religions, not in a way of preaching,
yes.
but to just kind of make a person more knowledgeable as they
yes,
grow
yes.
up as members of society.
And I know our department here is trying to get a program started with high schools, try to break into that system. Most people are completely unfamiliar that you can teach religion in an academic way without proselytizing, just simply look at the beliefs. I think that's something very important, especially now we really need to somehow bring religion into our national curriculum system. Just kind of, just show the basic beliefs of each religion, not only just the monotheistic religions, but the other religions. And I think people who study Eastern religions, my students are just as surprised to find out that really all the world's religions are after the same thing: peace, justice, righteousness. They want to live in peace with one another. We have differences, but we have enough in common that should help us get along. Oh, yes, sir. Thank you.
I just want to make some contribution to regarding the question you asked. The U.S. Government has particularly realized that there is a depth of understanding between Muslims in the people in the Muslim world and the West generally. So they are trying to bridge that gap, and the U.S. Department of State is trying to sponsor some projects through some non-profit organizations in the U.S. here, and those projects will be involved in exchange of high school students from Muslim countries to the United States, and there will also be an exchange in the other way. High school students from the United States will be taken to Muslim countries. They will school there for, like I know in Ames, Iowa, where I come from, there is an organization that is bringing 30 Nigerian high school Muslim students to Iowa here, and they will be hosted by Muslim families. The essence of that is to, create a better understanding between the two religions, I mean between people, Islamic Muslims and members of the US community. I think it's one of the efforts that is being done presently.
Before I came here, when I was in graduate school in Philadelphia at Temple University, we had a large Islamic contingent from countries all over the world. A number of them were high school teachers. They were going back, and I thought that was a very valuable service. People could go back and learn about world religions and teach in their country, and we need more cultural exchange, like people going back and forth in one another's countries, which I don't think we have enough of right now in the Middle East, as well as other Islamic countries. Are there any other? That's it. Well, thank you all for coming. Oh, did you have a question? I'm sorry.
Explain the root word for jihad again, please.
Oh, the what meaning? It means literally just to strive or struggle, to exert oneself. And Muhammad used it to idea of strive, struggle against evil, to be a righteous person. And Judaism, Christianity essentially teach the same thing, that to be a Jew or Christian is to strive and struggle against evil, against Satan, and be a righteous person. But Muhammad stressed it even more, so that's the central duty. And broadened it and said even further, we're all in a universal community of believers striving, struggle together against evil to be a righteous person. And that's why Islam focused on the creation of the community, not Muhammad's birth. It's not the most important day. That's really, in a sense, the beginning of Islam, the universal community. We're all in this common struggle together. And even we recognize Jews and Christians as partners in that struggle, that they're protected religions, they still believe in the one God. And so that's the meaning of the word. It actually has no relationship to warfare itself. The word just means strive, struggle.
It's part of the common language rather than a description.
Yes. People would have understood that at the time they heard jihad, they would not think warfare. Somehow it's become perverted in our world when media, they say jihad, warfare, and that's un-Islamic. That's just European stereotypes going back to the Crusades and much later periods. And it's not allowing Islam to speak for itself. Any more? I think that's it. Well, thank you all for coming.